This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland went to the lane, locked to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim.
Welcome to Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including Bally Sports Ohio, without cable. There's no cost and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. Well, folks, How you doing, Carter?
Doing good. My little macro on the live stream broke and it cut out early, so whoops.
I'm aware, but at least you managed to ruin the introduction, even for those that are listening on audio after the fact. The season is over for the Cleveland Cavaliers, unfortunately. No Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, Craig Porter Jr., Ty Jerome. The list went on and on for the Cavs in this one, but they still managed to put up a good fight against the Boston Celtics. A spirited effort led by a strong performance from Evan Mobley. Joining me today, after interrupting me, is my co-host Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
Well, normally I'm just not on camera this early, you know? So I'm frazzled. No, I'm doing okay. It was sad to see the season end. In so many ways, this game felt like a microcosm of the season that was, battling uphill against, just not having the horses available, fighting against all odds and having the guys just really, hang around even in games where maybe they weren't supposed to. And then, on the other side, kind of the microcosm of Darius's kind of frustrating season where, there were flashes, the playmaking's there at times, but then the scoring isn't. So, I just think it was kind of if the season was going to end, this was kind of the right way for it to end in a weird way.
It was the right way for it to end. And, I'm going through emotions live here when it comes to the season being over. We talk about often, how we approach this from a fan standpoint, and, us as fans and fans listening to this, right? Like, the Cavs are a massive part of our calendar, right? They take up so much of the year. We put so much energy into them. And, it's a form of escapism. At the end of the day, that's what sports are here for. We're here because we love it, because we love talking Cavs. We love talking to other people that love talking about the Cavs. And anytime a season comes to an end, a piece of you feels like it's missing. At least that's how I feel. And I'm appreciative that the last taste in my mouth this season is different than last year. Last year, after Game 5 against the Knicks, the Cavs just didn't come out with the proper effort. They didn't put their best foot forward. And, as frustrating as that series was, how it ended definitely made it feel a little bit worse. This year, we didn't get that. This year, they had every single opportunity to quit. Every single player that was out there was playing hurt. You're down a whole bunch of bodies. You have a tough series against the Orlando Magic. You rise to the occasion in Game 5, where it's your first test, where you got punched in the mouth twice. And you come out and you win that game. You defend home court. Then you do the same thing in Game 7. Both of those games shorthanded without Jared Allen, who had been arguably their best player in the series through the first 4 games. You get that Game 7 experience. Then you go out and you beat Boston in Game 2. Nothing easy about that. And you hang around in all these games. It's the complete opposite feeling. They gave absolutely everything that they had this year, and that is something that, as a fan, I really appreciate, and I'm glad that that's going to be the lasting memory, as bittersweet as this ending is.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, I know that you lose Game 1 by 25, you lose Game 3 by 13, Game 4 by 7, Game 5 by 15, but so I guess if you're just box score hunting, you would say, okay, that was, a thorough butt kicking, and maybe history will remember it that way. I don't really care. I mean, to me, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, because I felt like they made the Boston Celtics go out and beat them in a way that I don't really think they made New York do that. I mean, New York played well in that series, don't get me wrong, but I thought last year was much more about the Cavs not being ready to meet the moment than
The Knicks were victory adjacent.
yes. So like I think that that I'm proud of. Just a weird year, man. I think by every beginning of the season metric, I think they accomplished their goals. They won a round in the playoffs. It was kind of hard to really challenge in the second round with how hurt they were and frankly where they landed on the bracket against a historically good Celtics team. But like, it was just kind of this weird up and down year where just never felt easy. And sometimes you have years like that where, you have that other than the 2-month stretch in January, February. I just don't think there was a stretch where it was like, just rolling through the season and working on our stuff. And sometimes we win and sometimes we lose. It kind of felt tense the whole way through. I really hope that it's an outlier season on their development curve from that perspective, where that things can click in a little easier. They can get some continuity with their guys, get a little healthier, and just play a little better on a night-to-night basis. But like ultimately, like through it all, even though I would argue last year was a much better vibes year than this year, they got further in the playoffs and looked better in the postseason. So like, I don't quite know how to reconcile that in my head in terms of like my feels, but it was one of those years where for me at least, I'm not quite sure what to make of it.
I can sum it up my feelings, or at least my immediate feelings, because we're going to go through waves of emotion. I'm sure, as we do future podcasts throughout the summer, we're going to be looking back. We're going to be drawing on this experience over and over again, just like we did with last year. But we should probably say on the front end, we will be taking a little bit of a break after this podcast. We will be back at the start of June, but we are going to take 2 weeks off because this has been a long season. We experimented with, going live after every single game. It's been a lot of fun kind of doing that coverage, but we need a little bit of a break here. But if I can sum up my immediate feeling right now, it's bitter. I feel bitter because this was a Cavs roster that I love. Up and down, every single player on this. I love the additions. I love what they were able to bring. They all had moments this year where they stepped up. Like even someone like George Niang, who had a tough playoff, what he did for the Cavs post All-Star break was important. Like they didn't win as much as he would have liked post All-Star break, but the shots he was hitting and how well he played down that stretch got them the wins that they needed to, get home court by a thin margin. Like that was important. I just, this is a very, very likable team that went through so much this year, and I just feel like they're better on paper than what the ultimate results are, and I'm annoyed. I'm frustrated. I'm a little angry that we didn't get to see this team fully healthy really at any point this season. And, fully healthy probably wouldn't have, I don't think we even needed that. I think you just needed relatively healthy, like the normal kind of bumps and bruises that you play with in the playoffs. And you could have had a real chance to push Boston. So the fact that we didn't get that, to me, that's frustrating. It really, really drives me nuts. And this has just been such a tough season where I thought, we would have had that chance to really kind of see what this group's going to do. And again, you're going to have to head into this offseason with incomplete data points. And, that's a frustrating spot to be in.
Yeah, I mean, we saw some proof of concept stuff, and that's the one thing I felt going into the year was coming out of that Knicks series last year, I felt like the roster was so imperfect on the margins that it was hard for me to evaluate anything. I think, just as an example here, I can just say Darius had, a rough year. He had the context to have a better, there's context around it and stuff like that. But it was the roster wasn't preventing Darius from having a good year,
Yeah.
or a good playoff series or whatever it may be. I think like there's something to be said for that like they did do what I asked, which was get these complementary pieces that could, at least kind of just open things up and allow guys to slot into natural roles, maybe not depend on certain guys as much. I mean, it's still hard to say that, with Niang just having probably the worst 3 weeks of his basketball career. Actually, almost certainly the worst 3 weeks of his basketball career. And and then guys getting hurt. So it wasn't all there. I think that's, if I'm bitter about anything, it was that, I felt like at times they had better talent on the floor and sometimes worse process this season on both sides of the floor, where I thought they ran pretty good stuff last year and just didn't always have the personnel to accomplish it. So I just think they were a little up and down in that, but that a lot of that comes down to reps, and time and health,
the lack
and
of continuity
and for that was, and it's so funny, dude, because we looked at this stupid league and we looked at Boston trying to integrate Porzingis and Holiday. We looked at Milwaukee looking to integrate Dame. We looked at the Sixers staring down the barrel of a James Harden trade, and we said at the beginning of the year that the Cavs' number one advantage would be their continuity. And
I'm going to just stop giving takes like that.
I know.
I think I'm going to put it all on myself, and that's the frustrating thing.
But we just didn't get it. We didn't actually have that continuity because, we just didn't have guys on the court enough, and they just, I don't know. I just feel like compared to last year, guys did miss a lot of time last year, but when they were on the court, they were on the court and they were them. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of guys out there, I felt like all season and through the postseason, that were hovering between 60 to 70% of what I would normally expect them to be. And that makes it messier.
Yeah. And I think even when you look at someone like Darius last year, I think a lot of the perception early on was, he had a slow start and it was frustrating, but he ended up having the best season of his career, right? Like the scoring was exactly the same. Took that assist to turnover ratio from being pretty high the year before to being the second best in the league behind Jokic among high usage players. Defensive metrics went way up. The efficiency went way up, right? Like there was so much progress that was made last year. And I think, there's a double-sided coin here that I think has kind of emerged when it comes to the Cavs, because you mentioned it earlier. The goals that this team stated on media day, back-to-back years, they have achieved that. The first year it was, hey, we got Donovan Mitchell. Our goal is to avoid the play-in. I think people, because of how well the Cavs played that year, they forget that, Zach Lowe and a whole bunch of other pundits had them 7th and 8th even after the Donovan Mitchell trade. It was okay. Atlanta's going to be there. Toronto's going to be up above them, right? They exceeded expectations and they achieved the goals that they stated out on media day. This year it was, we want to take that step forward and we want to win a round. We want to show that we can, we belong with another team. Again, they checked off those goals. Now, I think the fact that both of these years have ended with them achieving those media day goals and it's still feeling frustrating, maybe there's a conversation to be had of, hey, are we setting too modest goals for what we have as a roster? Because, I think what we've seen over these last 2 years is, hey, yeah, you've achieved your goal, but we can tell that there's so much potential here. We can tell that this core is capable of doing more. And that's why we're sitting here at the end of the season feeling like we want more.
Well,
I don't know. That's going to be, one of those kind of self-evaluation things that you're looking at. And, obviously this year it's injuries, right? That's the primary story. It makes it impossible to evaluate. But it makes me wonder, hey, what we've seen these 2 years, even though we would have liked to have accomplished more, maybe you go into next season, if you're able to bring this group back together, maybe you go into next season with even more elevated expectations, and you're attacking the offseason more aggressively, whether that comes from an internal development standpoint, whether that comes from, moves to make changes to the roster, whether that's, your evaluations of the core. Everything's going to come under the microscope, but I think there's enough momentum here and there's enough kind of meat on the bone to make you think, hey, man, there really is something here. There really is a team that can go and push the Boston Celtics somewhere in here.
Yeah, and it's funny. Their playoff performance, I thought, was honestly surprisingly tough considering how rough the end of their season was. Because, and I think if there's reason for that level of kind of pessimism, like, yeah, they tracked up on the macro of like how far they made in the playoffs. They were a worse team this year on the court. They just were.
Yeah.
They were. They had the 16th best offense in the league this year. Last year they were 8th. They had the 7th best defense this year. I think last year they were 1 or 2. I can't remember. Like there were tangible steps back, despite the fact that the surrounding talent was a little bit better. And a lot of that is injuries, but I think a lot of it is like, I do think there's probably some soul searching to be done a little bit with this team of like, what is it going to take for us as an organization to juice the offense? Because, we watched this team just play through this entire round of the playoffs without, with one big on the floor, and the offense still was gunky and still unable to cross 100 points consistently. They only crossed 100 twice in the series, playing one big, playing guys like Marcus Morris and Dean Wade and Isaac and Max Strus and Isaac Okoro, downshifting, and didn't really unstick their offense much. And like you might say, part of that's just performance from the lead guards, and losing Donovan for the last 2 games. It's certainly worth considering and asking, though. One of the 2 games they got over 100 was a game Donovan didn't play. But like, I still feel like that is the nut the organization has to crack. Whether it is the offensive system they're running, whether it is that internal development, I just want to see this team consistently have a strong plan to generate clean looks, and be able to execute that against a higher percentage of the league.
Mm-hmm. No, I think there's a lot of validity to that, right? Like there's a lot of reasons that went into it, but last year they were definitely more than the sum of their parts. This year they weren't able to integrate all of those pieces and find that right balance. And as you said, when the offseason comes, like, it's that time for soul searching. Everybody from to steal a line from Giannis, everyone from the equipment manager all the way up to Kobe Altman, right? We are all looking at what you can do better, what worked, what didn't work. If things didn't work, is that something you still believe can work if you make, the appropriate changes and whatnot? Like, all of that is going to come under the microscope, and those are the type of tough decisions and soul searching that you have to do when it comes to the playoffs. But
can I throw out another thing I would like that again,
go ahead.
I always talk about how off seasons are all about what lessons you choose to learn from, because if you try to solve every problem, first off, you're gonna end up taking it's like plugging a dam most of the time after you lose a playoff series. Of like, it's not just one thing almost ever that causes something, and if you address one thing, sometimes a different leak springs. So it's like you have to be judicious in how you're building the roster. And I'll tell you one thing: if last year my MO was shooting, I need guys who are going to get guarded so Darius and Donovan have a chance. I gotta say, Justin, I think my MO this offseason is going to be positional size.
Okay, interesting.
I felt like, especially the problem with the way the team is constructed right now, at least in my opinion, is that you have, when you have the 2 bigs out there, it kind of lets everything click into place, because you can be a little smaller at every other position. You can have the army of you can have a couple 6'1", 6'2" guards. You can have a couple wings that are 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", and like, that's all well and good. But the second they had a downshift because of their roster construction, all very quickly, whenever they put Niang on the floor, less so Wade, because Wade's just such a good defender, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy. But every time they had to put a Niang on the floor, all of a sudden it felt like one big and then the other team was bigger than us at the other 4 positions.
Yeah.
And something that watching a team like Orlando, watching a team like Boston over these last 2 rounds, it's like just being able to dig out just having that not just height, but that frame advantage in a lot of spots, being bigger and stronger. You just get foul calls. You can push people around. You can switch easier. You don't get caught in weird switches that you have to tag out of as often. I think that if if I'm the Cavs, if I'm looking to make additions to my roster long term, and there's not a ton of roster spots right now, so this might be somewhat moot. But I just think positional size is something that I'm keeping my eye on if I were running the team.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things to keep an eye on for sure. When it comes to Boston, like when I look at them, I noticed the gap in playmaking. Like I think adding additional playmakers, especially in the front court, like obviously you want Evan Mobley to grow in that role. And I think what he did today, and we're going to go a little more in depth on him later. But I think, there's the path there, but just how many creators Boston has, I think you see the value, what that can do to unlock an offense. And,
4 years later, we still want a big playmaking wing, don't we, Justin?
I would like a couple. I would like playmaking depth all over the place because, I think what we saw in these couple games without Donovan is Cavs went back to almost that identity that they had prior to the All-Star break, where it's all right, the ball's moving quick. Everyone's, we're firing up threes at a high rate. Strus is playmaking. All of a sudden, you see so much more of that, right? You see the Garland Mobley pick and roll chemistry that hadn't really been there as prominently. You saw that again these last 2 games because they have such great chemistry together, and a lot of that stuff kind of got put on the back burner, and things bogged down offensively. So, all right, what can we do to maintain that tempo? What can we do to get that kind of playmaking, to highlight the playmaking strengths we already have, and, potentially bring in more? Like that's one of the, if you're looking for, a potential addition to the roster, that's something I would look at there. When it comes to the podcast, I'm not really thinking of any additions because the only other support that we need is what we already got from Zoom. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects.
Oh, buddy. It's sad. It's sad that it's over.
I am definitely sad. And, one of the points I was going to make a little earlier, and I'm glad that you led us down the tangent you did, but I just want to bring it up when you talk about, looking at this statistically through the regular season as a step back from the year before. We talk about growth not being linear from an individual level, but sometimes that's also the case from a team standpoint. And even though the team ultimately in the postseason, like we did it when it was positive to negative the year prior, where, I segment the regular season and the playoffs as 2 different years, right? And you can achieve your regular season goals, and then you can not achieve your postseason goals. This year was the opposite. I feel like they weren't as good as we wanted to be in the regular season, and they achieved their postseason goals. So that's a different conundrum to look at. But one of the things, a conversation that came up in our Discord where, we're just kind of evaluating everything there. And, a pessimistic talking point, but the talking point nonetheless was, man, like I just want us to at least be what the Raptors were in those years where LeBron was beating up on them, right? All those type of seasons, like just kind of those deep playoff runs and whatnot. And I said, well, remember what that looked like. Remember how that all started off. One, that was a bunch of players that were in their prime and a lot older than Garland and Mobley and a lot of the key guys here. But it started off the first year they brought him in with a Game 7 loss against the Brooklyn Nets. The following year, they got swept by the Washington Wizards in an upset series. And then the year after that, they made the Eastern Conference Finals without a major shakeup to the core. So, I think that's one of those kind of moments where it's like, sometimes we can be so prisoner of the moment and we want, microwave changes. We want to see, okay, let's just get to where we want to be, and let's take whatever shortcuts are available to us. But I think on the other side of that coin is all right, as much as we want to, I'm putting myself in the shoes of the Cavs front office right now. As much as we want to be critical and look at where we can get better and what we need to address, you also kind of have to let things marinate for a little bit. You have to let things cook and with the appropriate amount of time. And that's always going to be the toughest thing to evaluate, right? Is how do we balance leaving the room for internal development so that guys can grow into roles and take on those responsibilities that we are leaving vacant, versus bringing in talent that is going to occupy those roles and take that off of their plates, which in turn could potentially limit development because you're not giving those developmental reps. It's a tough balance to strike.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about room to cook. I mean that's my every time I'm trying something new in the kitchen is that cooked enough? Oh crap, I overdid it. And you never quite know. And like that's where there is some science to team building, but there is also a lot of art to it. And and it'll be interesting to see what this front office and an ownership group kind of decides to do in terms of, do they believe that turkey in the oven is ready to go and moving in the right direction? Or is it like, oh man, this thing's dry and we need to throw it out for parts? Like that's a decision you have to make every time your season ends, unless you win the title. And like I tend to be, I like these guys. I like this core. I like them individually. I think that they showed growth in a postseason setting, even in a very suboptimal year. Where the on-court product I do think took a major step back during the regular season. They only lost three more games, but I think those wins were fewer and further in between and harder to find, harder won. So I think for me, I just want to see that curve get normalized and get that moving back up, because I think like we said this kind of going into the year, like if nothing else, this should be a great regular season try-hard team, like that is fighting for the 1, 2, 3 seed.
God bless them. They were a damn try-hard team. Like with the adversity that they had, like when Garland and Mobley went out, like that 3-1 stretch they had without Garland, Mitchell, and Mobley, like that swung the season in a lot of ways. It just wasn't, our margin for error was so much smaller because of kind of the compounding injury issues that we had.
And that's fair to say, but I do want to challenge just a little bit, because I felt like all the best parts of this season came while they were overcoming something. I feel like their highs were found under duress, and like great teams, truly great teams, are the ones that when they're whole, no one wants to touch them. And I don't know if the Cavs got there this season. And that's really what I want to see. I wanted to, there's a reason I spent literally the entire year harping on that starting 5 net rating getting good over time, because it's like you need a great fastball. I just don't think the Cavs had one this year. I think they were like a middle reliever, just putting Crisco on the ball and doing whatever they could to get an extra like quarter inch of spin on the thing. But like I don't know if they ever got as high as they wanted to get in the regular season. Yeah,
I love when you go to baseball analogies; they always land with me. But
it's really a major league reference. I don't watch baseball.
Okay, fair. It's. You're correct. But, I'm always going to default to, like, I think you're correct to push back on that, but I'm just going to keep sitting here largely on injury island.
Yeah, because there's something to that.
Because when they found their rhythm, you had, 9-1 or 9-3 with Mitchell and Allen, and then Garland and Mobley come back on the minute restriction, and you go 9-1 in that stretch. And that is the best that they looked all season long. And the last game of that stretch, Donovan Mitchell tweaks his knee and is not himself for the rest of the year. He misses pretty much the entire post-All-Star break segment of the season, and then we get to these playoffs. They just didn't have the runway. They didn't have the time. But I do agree that even when you go back earlier in the year, there just wasn't that rhythm and identity, right? Like we always talk about how this team, everybody comes early, right? And they have the training camps before the training camps, and that's helped them get off to these good starts year after year. And they just didn't have that. And you know, you could point to the, you know, Allen missing time to start the year and the hamstring injuries that the Garland and Mitchell were dealing with, and the hand, the neck, the back, everything. Like it goes on and on and on. There's a lot of valid reasons there, but it took a long time to kind of find that identity. And I think that that is something that when you're looking back on the season, it warrants, you know, introspection of individually every single player. Okay, why did it take us a while to find that rhythm? Why weren't we able to sustain, and why weren't we able to build in those ways? I think that that's a fair statement.
Yeah, and also, like, it's funny, you know, like, while we're making these kind of connections, like, we've talked about, like, kind of Evan at his worst is a guy who's kind of cursed with options. He's got so many things he wants to be able to do that sometimes, like, it kind of paralyzes him, and he's not decisive. I think to some extent, maybe that was the story of that. Of some of our, you know, quote unquote best lineups that we thought we would have at the beginning of the year, where, you know, everyone's working really hard to try to do the perfect thing, and then once someone gets hurt, you know, things pared down, things got simpler, and you could just say, all right, we're gonna run spread pick and roll and take a three every time you're barely open, you know, and like that is simpler. And like, to, you know, again, to challenge the org a little bit, something that we have said kind of in defense of, or, you know, in praise of this coaching staff in this era of Cavs basketball, is every time the offense got more options, the offense got better. It grew more complex. They ran more interesting things. They got better results. This is the first year where I don't think that's necessarily true. And even in that 9-1 stretch, it wasn't like the starters were blowing the doors off of teams. You know, it was still a lot of these, you know, different lineup combinations that were working their way. So, like, I think that's a spot where I just think they, you know, things didn't quite click for whatever reason. I think the team's going to have to look really hard at that and figure out kind of how to make it click, because, like, they found great ancillary lineups. That's what was really interesting, is I just felt like they never found their knockout blow lineup.
Yeah, and, you know, that is part of why, you know, I continue to say that I'm appreciative that the organization did go in and make the Donovan Mitchell trade, and, you know, kind of put that additional pressure on these young guys, because as much as the discourse gets, you know, toxic and awful when things don't go well, I do think that these are important problems to solve while you're in those early developmental years, right? Like when you talk about Mobley being cursed with options, like I would rather have him figure out how to be aggressive with options on the floor and learning how to play off of other guys, even if that means a step back, rather than, all right, let's just strip everything down. Let's get some role players here that are just going to stand around, and we're running one guard, one big pick and roll, and that's it. And you're going to get your stats. And stats are going to look great. And then in 6-7 years, we're going to bring in another star, and you're going to try to figure out that at that point. I don't agree with that as a team building philosophy. I think part of what you're seeing with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in the playoffs right now is, all right, you know, we had Isaiah Thomas. We're going to take a swing with Kyrie. Oh, that didn't work. We got Gordon Hayward. We got Kemba Walker. We're taking a lot of hacks at this because we want to continue to find what works. We're going to keep, you know, taking gambles and making gambles that, hey, if it doesn't pay off, we've got to pivot. We're ready to pivot off of that, because we want to stress test our stars as much as possible. And those guys, like, as you know, as frustrated as I am with them, having gone through a playoff series, like, I do think that they've benefited from that, and they have, you know, it's come with all of that media scrutiny of, oh, you got to break up the Jays, you know, they can't perform in the clutch, blah, blah, blah. Like, you are going to put your team under the microscope, and it's going to make things worse from an outside noise perspective. But I do think those struggles, if you learn the right lessons from them and if you act on them, are very, very important. But the last qualifier, I think, is the most important component of that.
Yeah, again, this is the art and science conversation in miniature here. This is the challenge that this front office is going to have is, like, do you listen? I'm sure Danny Ainge and now Brad Stevens heard people. I'm sure in closed boardrooms they had those conversations of like, do Jalen and Jason really work together, or are they too samey and we need to find someone with a different kind of verve or energy or rhythm or archetype to try to pair with Tatum. Tatum's always been kind of 1A there. And over again they evaluated the landscape and said, nah, we'll roll with it. We'll roll with these guys. And and here's the thing. Those guys might tell you that they believed in these two from start to finish, and that they never ever considered blowing it up. One, I wouldn't believe that, and two, even though they didn't blow it up, it's just because they never found something to make it worth their while. I don't think it was for lack of trying, based on all reporting, and lack of looking around and dipping your toe in the Kevin Durant pool and all these different explorations that have happened over the years. And that's why, also, I think the other lesson to learn from that isn't just patience with sticking with your guys and rolling with them in forever. It's really not pre-deciding what you're gonna do with the archetypes of your team, and just playing the game, playing the front office game, playing the coaching game, playing the on the court actual development game, because you might have a chance to change what the fundamental identity of this team, and that chance might be so good based on your current evaluations of things that you go ahead and pull that trigger. But if you decide today that you have to change who you are,
change for the sake of change,
you're putting yourself into a corner, and I would not recommend any front office do that.
No, and I think the casual fan, and I will include myself in casual fan, just because we sit here and talk in front of Mike, at the end of the day, I'm just a damn fan. I think I'd be horrified if I learned just how many scenarios that a front office considers on a day-to-day basis, throughout an off season and all that. And, I think we've always tried to stay away from the recommending of, what moves should be done, because we're never going to have the data points that a front office is going to have. What we like to focus on is what's going on the court, right? What is the data telling us there? What do we value from an archetype standpoint? Even something like how Evan Mobley performs as a 5, right? That's something that we've looked at a lot. I've always been very adamant that I feel he's kind of best as a 4 defensively. But, there is an added value to the space that he has, right? And I think you saw at times in the playoffs of, okay, well, if he's playing with a 4 like Dean Wade or Marcus Morris, you can kind of get him still being that free roamer, right? So that's a valuable data point. That's something you learned in a playoff setting. I think you saw, them go away at times this postseason from the shared creation of Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, and things kind of bogged down, right? And I don't think, I'm not putting this blame on any one person, but we always talk about, the growth that you make. It's great over an 82 game season, but when you're stress tested, when guys are cold and whatnot, do you stick with your offense, or do you kind of pare that down and, play hero ball? And I think we got a little bit too much of that, to the point where guys weren't as involved. I think the fact that the offensive output has kind of roughly been the same without Donovan Mitchell, who's playing at such a damn high level, that's goes to what you're talking about of, when you have the options out there, making sure that everybody is being optimized, and that there are, everybody's getting involved, that you're maximizing the talent that you have available to you. And even though that they were able to accomplish their goals in the playoffs, I think that there's enough data here to say, all right, this is where we could have made life easier for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's two consecutive playoffs where you can't score reliably. I mean, and you have to look at your process and look at your, you have to look really hard at your process, define whether your players stuck to that process or didn't. And if they stuck to that process and you still are, hanging around 97.0 rating and things like that, then it's, you have to kind of figure out what do we need to change and how much can we change year over year. So it's I think no matter what the team looks like from a roster construction perspective next year, I do kind of expect them to look different in terms of what they're trying to do, because you just kind of have to keep playing. You have to keep learning from these playoff experiences and take different data points. I know, and this is where I don't know, maybe people will roll their eyes at me for saying this because I don't think the numbers really back this take up. Don't pre-roll. I don't know if the numbers really back this take up, but I do think they had a better offense than in this postseason than they did against the Knicks. I think the Knicks were a far worse defensive team than the two teams they just played.
Yeah.
And whether it's just better shot making from, Donovan, which obviously you just didn't get much of last year, whether it's some extra, a couple big nights from Strus, whether it's Mobley, real talk about, and we should probably close with Mobley.
Yeah, I think we should.
Mobley really finding his footing, but I felt like they were hopeless to get a clean look last year against the Knicks, and this year I thought when they ran their stuff right, they got good looks. They didn't make enough of them, but they had options and had a road to executing at a higher level, and so I have seen some incremental progress. I guess is really the take I'm getting to.
Yeah.
But is it enough? I think they need to find a way to take some kind of jump with their offense in the postseason.
Yeah, and I still believe that is capable. They are capable of doing that with the existing core that they have. But that's a thing that's going to need to be evaluated, right? That is, as I said a million times, they're going to have more data points than us, and beyond the need for a break, because let's just pull back the curtain. This has been an exhausting season. This has been a real tough year on myself. Going through this Achilles thing was probably the worst thing that I've had to go through from a mental standpoint. And the ups and downs and wanting to just turn on and see the Cavs take care of business. And of course, I tore it at the end of that 18-2 streak, so it was a whole bunch of injured games, and I was just kind of frustrated. It's been a tiring year. But I think beyond the rest, the benefit of us taking the rest of May off here and coming back at the start of June is we're going to hear what they have to say in the exit interviews. We're going to have an idea of what their takeaways are, right? We're going to have more information to go off of, because we can sit here and speculate on what it looks like from the outside. I'm pretty damn far away from Cleveland. You're closer, but you're still away. And even people that are in the building don't know the team as well as the team themselves. So I'm very, very interested to hear the comments, where, what the lessons are that they have. And obviously, the actions that follow. There's a lot of different directions. It's an incomplete data set. It's frustrating, but I think there's enough there to be positive of, to not have knee-jerk reactions and freak out over what they've built, because what they've built is still very promising in my eyes. And when it comes to someone like Darius, I'm pretty damn confident that he hasn't peaked at 22, 23 years old here.
I will be buying Darius stock this summer.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear from you as a noted Darius skeptic. But I've of course been horned.
I'm never going to shake the DJ Augustine allegations.
Not a chance in hell. But I think one of the brightest things, I think one of the most encouraging things is Evan Mobley. I came into this year saying that I didn't expect a leap from Evan Mobley. I expected incremental growth at what he was already good at. But, as the season's progressed, there continues to be those kind of flashes, right? It's been the shooting from deep, where he's showing that touch after the All-Star break on a smaller sample size, right? We talk about, hey, it'd be nice to see him, be a taller Bam Adebayo. Well, he's made and taken 3 times as many threes as Bam has taken in his career, right? Like that's an encouraging sign for someone that's still 22 years old. And for a guy that came into the series against the Boston Celtics with a previous career high of 17 points in a playoff game, he averaged over 21. He averaged 21.4 points per game against Boston. And obviously these last two games where him and Darius had that two-man game going again were a big part of that.
Yeah, I mean, 9.5 boards as well. Didn't get as many blocks just because Boston's so good at pulling you out. But I thought, he was really the only consistent road to the Cavs getting stops against a pretty super-powered Boston offense where, Boston only gets over 110 twice in a 5-game series. I think Evan gets the vast majority of that credit because when things ran the best, the it's not like the Cavs are going nuts at the point of attack. Most of the time, it was just doing your job well enough to get Evan involved in the play and let him recover out to shooters after he snuffed out shots at the point of attack. I just thought his defense was unbelievable yet again, which it was last year, but really it kind of comes back to that offense where, a lot of 4, 6, 7 point games last year, 0.08 points per possession in the pick and roll. The stat of, I think this postseason means we don't have to ever say that number again. This closing game of 33 points on 15 of 24, where not only did he figure out that Luke Cornett was not going to handle him on a face-up, he also figured out that Al Horford wasn't, and Jason Tatum wasn't, and he was going to slip into space when they tried to switch actions with him and Darius, and he consistently finished as the roll man. If you're an agenda guy, I guess you could say it was all the space that he had. I don't really think so. I think Evan was just as bad when he was the only big against the Knicks than as he was when he was sharing the floor with Jarrett. And this is growth. This is development. And as it always has been, Justin, Evan is the key to all this. He is the ceiling raiser of this group. You talk about that front court playmaking. He is the road to that. So I thought him taking these positive steps. I mean, he had rough games against Orlando, where he just, he wasn't getting the line at all in that series, which made it tough. And he really didn't get to the line at all in this series either, which was a Cavs problem writ large.
Yeah, that was a team-wide issue.
But 8 of 12, 9 of 15, 7 of 11, 8 of 13, 15 of 24. Those are really, really respectable outcomes. I'm happier with 9 of 15 than I would have been with 7 of 9 from the field.
Totally agree.
The fact that he's getting up double-digit attempts, pressuring the Boston defense, even when it's not perfect, you're at least, he never was invisible in this series, which you couldn't even say against Orlando because he had Game 6 where he only gets up 5 attempts. And even in Game 7, he only had 8. So I felt like it was just a big growth series for him. And Boston, which was much smaller than Orlando was. And, I thought Evan did a great job of helping punish that.
Yeah. And, he did kind of problem solving on the fly, right? Which, everyone that talks about Evan says that the guy's a supercomputer, right? And he just kind of figures this stuff out. Like, as much as people point to, the playing at the 5, I agree with you. I don't think that's the whole story. I do think, that there's times where you see, his finishing is best suited as a 5. And if you can kind of strike that balance in the 30 minutes a night where you're only playing with one big, I think there's takeaways there. But you look at the Orlando series after Jared went down, it was 14 points, it was 3 points, it was 11 points, right? Like, it's not like, oh my God, all of a sudden I have the space and everything's working. And it wasn't necessarily easy at the start of the series against Boston, right? Like, the first half of Game 1 was very difficult for him. And he found something in that fourth quarter of Game 1 that he was able to carry forward in the 4 subsequent games. And I think that's an important thing to highlight because, people are going to be reductive and act like, hey, like he didn't figure anything out. He's just put in a better spot. No, Evan Mobley figured some stuff out here. And I hope that is something that he can carry forward. And also, what you look at when you look back at the tape of a playoff series is, all right, what did I do well? What did I figure out? And what can I add to my off-season regimen to accentuate what was working well? And what didn't work well? And is that something that I just got to, take out of the bag and, put it on a shelf or put it in storage and never look at it again? Or is that something that if I work at it can become a strength? Maybe I just need to add a counter to that move, and all of a sudden I'm going to have more success with the primary move because the defender has to think about what I'm doing with the counter, right? Like that's all the type of like valuable data points. And for a season where I don't think we have a lot of useful data on what this team is as a collective, I do think there's a lot on an individual basis. Like I really, really do think that because we managed to have an extended playoff run here, we got enough from that, right? Like whether it's Evan, working on what's worked well and adding those counters, from Darius' standpoint, obviously, adding the muscle that he had lost with the jaw issue, and getting back to the version of Darius that we saw prior to that, where he was at career best finishing at the rim and drawing fouls and stuff like that, right? Like just getting his body right and getting ready to handle a full 82 game season again, I think is one of the biggest things. But continuing to work on that aggressiveness, I think across the board there's enough valuable data from what we got in this playoff run for guys to know what they need to do to take that next step in the playoffs.
Yeah, man. I still feel like this team is on the come up. I don't think, and I'm excited to see what they do. I'm excited to see, are they going to use their draft pick? Are they going to trade it? It's going to be weird doing draft prep.
That's the other benefit of us taking some time off, because we're going to need to do like season in review. And then
the guy who did all my work for me got hired by the Philadelphia 76ers. So I don't know how I'm going to learn about this crap anymore.
What a dick. I mean,
shouts Adam Spinella.
Yeah, we'll definitely have some draft coverage when we come back. I think we'll start with some season in review stuff, then kind of go to the draft. But before we wrap this podcast up, I do have to thank all of our listeners. Whether it's you guys that are hanging out live right now, whether it's the people that reach out to us that send us feedback, send us questions when we ask for mailbags and stuff like that. Whether it's people in the Discord, like everybody that has supported the Cavs and us in some way, it really does mean a lot to us, because we try to do our absolute best when it comes to this. I'm always trying to get better at the podcast, and like I said, watching the Cavs is escapism, and it's a big part of our lives. But getting to do this and having this kind of special relationship with you guys, the fans, is really, really important. And obviously a big thanks has to go to the Cavs as well, for the support that they've given us, allowing us to have this platform where we can be critical and, trusting us to do it in a fair way. And, just the day-to-day support, just how great everybody is there, man. Like I haven't met a single person with the Cavs that hasn't been,
Matt
great to us, and just
Gold
good people.
And Brenna Lewis.
Matt and Brenna, you guys, we love you.
The
honestly,
two best.
You're absolute best. Brandon has been a terrific support. Carter, I've been going on for too long. You continue.
Yeah, geez, that was like a 3-minute monologue. Yeah, shouts Matt.
There's no Oscars music here to play me off.
Shouts
so
Matt. Shouts Brenna. Shouts Brandon. Shouts everyone on Georgia. Everyone on the Cavs digital staff takes such good care of us, and really, really helps us out. So thank you so much to them. Thank you to the listeners. Thank you, Justin, for being a great co-host, persevering through a rough year, and and again, thank you to the listeners. Thank you for listening to us babble on. We love this team. We love this gig, and it's really, really fun. And I'm sad it's over for now.
Yeah, I'm sad, but you know what? We got the summer of Byron Mullins, Carter. We got the summer of Byron Mullins. I did not mention it on the previous podcast. I took so much self-restraint. Ohio legend Byron, don't call me BJ Mullins, is a Winnipeg
Pride of
Sea
Canal, Winchester, Ohio.
We're getting a ring, buddy. We're getting a ring.
Oh,
We're getting an August parade. We got a stacked roster here. I don't know if I'm going to do the 60 seconds of Sea Bears because it's pretty damn self-indulgent, but
I love the 60 seconds of Sea Bears. It's for me more than it's for you, buddy.
All right, then we might have to keep the bit back. You know, that'll be in my 2 weeks of contemplation here. But big thanks to everyone that supported us. A big thanks to everyone that's tuning in live on YouTube. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Click notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of the review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.